The sixth story is called Two Gallants. I'm not sure how to pronounce that really. But the story is about friends who are in their early 30s, and one of them, the main character that the story follows, he feels stuck in life. And he spends his time walking around the city with friends, getting into random small adventures, and going to pubs. This character's name is Lenihan. He's like that one friend you invite to parties and social gatherings, and he like brightens up the mood and he's fun to be with, but you wouldn't, like you have a good time with him, but you wouldn't necessarily like confide in him for like deep personal shit, or you wouldn't rely on him, or you wouldn't have like a one-on-one chat with him in a cafe and have like life chats, you know? He's just like a fun friend to be with. He's not the most responsible either, and sometimes he may ask you to cover expenses for him, like food or whatever, like Uber rides, I don't know. Most people considered Lenihan a leech, but in spite of his reputation, his adroitness and eloquence had always prevented his friends from forming any general policy against him. He had a brave manner of coming up to a party of them in a bar and holding himself nimbly at the borders of the company until he was included in a round. No one knew how he achieved the stern task of living. You know, like sometimes you see people who are your age, like adults, and they don't seem the most organized or put together, and you're wondering how they live, how they get by. Lenihan's like, that's what he is to me. So Lenihan has his friend named Corley, and they're outside in the city, and Corley's talking about this woman he had like a connection with, and this woman's like a maid. She works as a maid, and Lenihan is doubting what Corley's saying, and they spot her in the streets as Lenihan and Corley are chatting. At the corner of Hume Street, a young woman was standing. She wore a blue dress and a white sailor hat. I'm not sure about the significance of this, but I saw in the footnote that blue and white represents the colors, like it's associated with like these colors, blue and white, they're associated with the Virgin Mary in Catholic tradition. Lenihan wants to take a closer look at her, so Corley's like, okay, I'm gonna talk to her, and you're gonna like walk past me and just get a good look at her, and I'm just gonna keep talking to her. And then they agree that they're gonna meet up after Corley talks to this girl. So Corley and the woman, they end up going for a walk, and it ends up being really long. So Lenihan is like left to himself, kind of like following them, stalking them, and he ends up losing time. He settles at a shop to eat to pass the time, and Lenihan comes off as a guy who constantly distracts himself with shallow fun and entertainment, mostly by including himself in others' businesses and lives, so that he's too distracted to think about like serious serious shit or make progress with his life. The problem of how he could pass the hours till he met Corley again troubled him a little. He could think of no way of passing them but to keep on walking. The girl brought him a plate of hot grocer's peas, seasoned with pepper and vinegar, a fork, and his ginger beer. He ate his food greedily and found it so good that he made a note of the shop mentally. When he had eaten all the peas, he sipped his ginger beer and sat for some time thinking of Corley's adventure. In his imagination, he blended the pair of lovers walking along some dark road. He heard Corley's voice in deep energetic gallantries, and saw again the leer of the young woman's mouth. This vision made him feel keenly of his own poverty, of purse and spirit. He was tired of knocking about, of pulling the devil by the tail, of shifts and intrigues. And there's a footnote that explains that pulling the devil by the tail is slang for being on the brink of financial catastrophe. He would be 31 in November. Would he never get a good job? Would he never have a home of his own? He thought how pleasant it would be to have a warm fire to sit by, and a good dinner to sit down to. He had walked the streets long enough with friends and with girls. He might yet be able to settle down in some snug corner and live happily if he could only come across some good simple-minded girl with a little of the ready. A little of the ready is slang for having immediate access to significant funds, again, from a footnote. And I think that these quotes, or this quote here, supports the idea that Lenihan is a leech. Like, that's a good way to describe what he is. And that's how he thinks. In the end, Lenihan and Corley meet up again, and Corley has a gold coin in his palm. It's implied that the woman, who remember, is a maid, she stole that gold coin from a servant and gave it to Corley. During my first read, I thought that because Lenihan was mentioned to be a leech, that Corley, it's like a normal thing in their friendship dynamic for Corley to give Lenihan things like that, like money. But yeah, that's the story.